if we're going to heal, let's talk very, very specifically about the way in which nonviolent communication might assist you in some of the healing work. And we can also talk a little bit about where the limitations of nonviolent communication may be. So nonviolent communication gives you 4 very particular tools to practice. The first one is the practice of observing instead of evaluating. And that is a mindfulness practice. It is a practice of developing an observer self. It's the practice of detaching your identity from all that is arising inside of you. It's about remembering that just because you think it doesn't mean that you believe it. It's about just because I feel depressed or I feel I'm in a depressive state doesn't mean that I am depressed. Or if I have a feeling, I am not the feeling. It is the ability to begin tracking your experience and keeping your sense of self and identity intact and holding it with love and compassion and dignity, while having a lot of compassion and consciousness about the experiences that you may be metabolizing. It's also the distinction of observation instead of evaluation is also an invitation, at least this is one of the ways I use it, to notice my memories and to be able to accurately categorize them as memories, rememberings of experiences that I've had that are arising inside of me in the present moment. And it's also the practice of noticing my imagination, the part of me that is imagining what might happen if and is predicting a particular kind of future. So the imagining piece tends to, if we're stuck in domination thinking, the imagination piece can bring up a lot of rumination. Vera, this piece is for you, because we start predicting a lot of negative outcomes based on previous experiences. So we have a remembering of the past arising in the present moment, and we have an anticipation of an undesired future arising in the present moment. And that first distinction of separating out observation from evaluation, that first practice of mindfully becoming aware of and allowing yourself to notice what's coming up, is the present moment consciousness that you bring to what is arising in you. And that's the part that gives you the ability to feel it, to track it, to notice it, to work with it, to co-create with it. But one of the things we really want to develop is an observer self so that you can have an experience and watch an experience. That's a piece that we need in order to really engage in healing. When we are trapped in the experience and we have no consciousness and it's just playing out inside of us, like somebody pressed play and we're just on a default script, we think of that as a reenactment of the experience, and we tend to keep creating what we've experienced before. The second one, feeling versus thinking, is about watching your default ratio. To what degree do you go, when you have something happening in your life, do you go up into your mind and out of your body? And to what degree do you drop into your body and into, all of your limbs and feel your states? You want to be able to do both. If you're being traumatized, you want to be able to freeze, dissociate, jump out of your body, anesthetize the pain, numb out, not be there. It's a helpful adaptive coping mechanism when there's trauma. But if that's the only thing we know how to do, then it's very difficult to heal it. So we need the practice of dropping in and learning to tolerate our feelings. So the practice of nonviolent communication gives you a lot of feeling words and a lot of feeling literacy to begin giving a name to an internal felt sense. And there's a lot of research out there that says that when we give a name to an internal sensate feeling, our nervous system re-regulates. It gives us a label. By the way, this is where labels are helpful. I know there's a big move in NVC that you should never diagnose and you should never label. And the spirit behind that teaching has to do with dehumanizing people. And dehumanizing people, we're not a fan of. But don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. You do still need to be able to label and categorize. Every time you use a word, you're labeling an internal or an external experience. You need labels. And being able to name a feeling is giving a label to an internal sense, and it helps soothe the nervous system. Think about the last time you were in distress and you talk to a friend and they go, wow, it sounds like you're lonely. And you're like, yes, I'm lonely. And you can feel your system recognizing an experience and naming it. One of the reasons why that is helpful is because we're bringing unconscious felt sense material up from the body and into the conscious verbal world, where we can begin working with it co-creatively. And that's where we can start healing. And let's talk in this moment about one limitation of NVC, depending on how you use it, is that nonviolent communication is a verbal conscious methodology in the communication model piece. So it is a really powerful and helpful tool for working with what you're conscious of. And also for developing a language and a literacy to get more conscious, to begin having accurate, like to put your experience into accurate buckets. Oh, that is an observation. Oh, that is an evaluation. Oh, this is a judgment. Oh, this is a feeling. Oh, this is a felt sense. Like it can be very helpful in organizing your internal information into the accurate buckets. But it is still a methodology that helps you work with a conscious verbal tool, language and words. And a limitation is that it doesn't, as a philosophy and orientation, it doesn't help people as much with what to do with all the unconscious material. It doesn't really address a lot of that as specifically. But what it does do is it gives you a mindset, an attitude, a spirit, and an orientation to cultivate in your heart about how to orient towards the unconscious material that is going to start coming up when you engage in any personal growth program. Does that make sense? Okay, so second, self-resourcing is being able to label your feelings, give accurate names to them, and then feel them. And then feel them. And Tracy Joy brought up a really lovely example earlier on about, Tracy Joy, when you're talking about how when I sort of feel into the freedom and the spaciousness that I feel in imagining that my beloved Kitty won't be here, it creates sort of a little bit of a tension and an inner conflict that how can I be both happy and sad? Like I'm grieving the loss, but I'm also celebrating some needs are not met, and some needs, my need for mourning may be met, my need for freedom may be met, but my need for the attachment and the constancy of a loved one wouldn't be. NVC is a really great methodology for being able to label the complexity of the experience and also to invite us to settle into making room for all experience and all feelings so that they can arise and be felt and be experienced in their complexity. And domination systems teach you that there are good feelings and there are bad feelings, and you should feel this way and you shouldn't feel that way. And as you begin working with these models, you start bumping up against some of these thought structures that you've internalized. And then you can begin calibrating and detoxing them. So that distinction between, am I more in my thinking space? Am I actually feeling and experiencing? And what can I tolerate and not tolerate is another self-resourcing practice. And you'll often discover that there are feelings that you can't tolerate and you don't want to tolerate. So one of mine is the feeling of loss, especially when it comes with the idea that the loss is a punishment, that it's some form of abandonment or rejection, which is more of an evaluation, but that is really hard. And I'll do anything to try and avoid that feeling. And that's unconscious. So a practice, a self-resourcing practice is about, I mean, I think I was telling you guys last week, like I was practicing, like, I love the feeling of abandonment, which is not a true feeling, but work with it however you like. I love the feeling of abandonment in my body, and settling and relaxing into whatever the feeling is that you're avoiding. When we are unwilling to feel the feeling, it can often convert into recurring thinking. That's where rumination can sometimes come from. That I will then begin looping with a bunch of thinking, and that can become a way of both avoiding and becoming ambivalent about a feeling state that I don't know what to do with. Third self-resourcing strategy from nonviolent communication is the difference between your universal human needs, which are your intrinsic life energy motivators that tell you about your survival and thriving system. They're your internal guidance about what you need to be seeking out to survive and thrive. And the difference between those universal human needs and the various strategies that we have unconsciously adopted and that are culturally normative, that are attempts to meet those needs, and very often maladaptive attempts to meet the needs. Okay. So as you begin sorting out the difference between how I'm trying to meet my needs and the need I'm trying to meet, and then you ground yourself in acknowledging that the need you're trying to meet is precious and beautiful and lovely. It tells you about your desires and your longings and your values and how you in particular are wired and what you're needing in that moment. And you really want to settle and ground in an awareness and a literacy of those needs, because it's also your connection to shared humanity with other humans. And separating that out from, and here are all the ways that I learned as a child to do it, or the things that have worked for some needs and not other needs. And then we can begin getting really conscious and creative with all of our strategies. And that's not about changing who you are. That's about changing how you do life so that you can more fully be who you are. Okay, and that goes back to the very first one of observation versus evaluation, not identifying with your strategies. That's not who you are. It's just the habits that you've developed. And then back to conscious and unconscious, that most of the strategies we have are just unconscious habits that we don't even realize we're doing. And many of them are thinking habits and perception habits. And then the very final distinction, which is also a form of self-resourcing, is the difference between making invitations and requests from a collaborative, shared humanity consciousness that are grounded in the present moment and that are attempts to meet the, to address the question of what would help in the here and now. So really learning to make concrete, behavioral, doable requests in the here and now about what my system is needing right now. Developing that skill, which, by the way, the inner work that often comes up around that skill has to do with permission to want what you want, permission to know what you want, permission to ask for what you want, having your desires be legitimate enough and credible enough and acceptable enough that you might actually invite somebody to help you with it. And a lot of what gets in the way for people around requests is that they think there's something wrong with their needs. They think they're too needy. They don't want to ask for what they want. They think they're going to get a no. They're going to feel bad if they get a no. You know, like there's just a lot of resistance that can come in around that. So the last distinction of making a request versus a demand, because what we're taught to do in a domination system is insist. And that demand energy where you have to, you must, you should, you're supposed to, when we lead with that energy of urgency and pressure and moralistic high ground, we create power struggles with other people. And so if we want to step out of the power struggle, we want to learn how to enter into dialogue and engagement in a way that is as respectful and caring as possible of all parties. And culturally, that is not our habit. Our habit is to come in with moral superiority. And it's a big turnoff to somebody who is different from you. Their defenses go up. Their desire to self-protect goes up. So another way of self-resourcing is trusting yourself enough to come from shared humanity and to honor the wisdom of your needs. Just because you have a need does not mean that you have to have it met right here, right now, in this way, in your preferred way. So one of the things you learn along the way in the practice is I may have a need for whatever, for acceptance. And if I'm in a particular kind of social interaction, that need may not be met. And two things are important: knowing that that need is not met in this situation, and knowing that I'm okay anyway. Because what we sometimes do is, my need isn't met, therefore I must act on all of these people to get them to meet my need. Or my need is not met and it cannot be met, therefore there must be something wrong with my need. Okay, two traps. There's probably more, but those are the two that occur to me. Here's a different way of positioning. I have a need for acceptance. Wow, when I'm around these particular people, that need for acceptance really is unmet. That doesn't feel good. I feel lonely and I feel a little insecure and I notice some weariness and I have a real longing for acceptance. With whom and where can I get this need met? How can I work on it first for myself and really just accept myself? You know, I know that all these people disagree with me and they think that I'm shit and they are projecting all kinds of stuff on me, and wow, that is lonely. But I can meet my need for acceptance. I like these things about myself. I am liking these beliefs, and knowing that I am going to meet my need for acceptance, where else can I get it met? And do I want other people to meet it? Do I not? So you start working with yourself in a more co-creative way. Now, when we have chronically unmet needs in our relationships or unhealed trauma, it's going to be really challenging to work with it in such an equanimous way. You're going to be triggered. Your stress response system is going to kick in. It's going to feel urgent. And again, since we're talking about acceptance, you can meet your need for acceptance by saying, okay, I'm getting a good snapshot of where I'm at in my own journey. And it's okay. I get to be where I'm at. I get really triggered. I get really upset. I get really urgent. I have a lot of urgency around this. And you go right back to observation versus evaluation. Step one, can I work with myself with gentleness, compassion, dignity, acceptance? Now, when I can't, because I will tell all of you, there are many times in my life, I know this, and living it is different. Often because I haven't had other people give me enough of it through childhood, through adulthood, through whatever. Then I go and seek out communities, people, friends, loved ones who can help me by giving me the thing that I'm unable to give myself in that moment. But be careful that you don't go with demand energy, right? Find those interactions where there's this lovely synergy of I have a need and you would enjoy meeting the need. And so we're both enjoying what we're doing. Not I have a need and you're going to feel burdened by it and you don't really want to do it, but you feel like you should, because if you were going to be a good friend, you would do this. And so you're watching out for all of that.